A vast, desolate void stretched endlessly, filled with the flickering remnants of forgotten battles. Metal husks of once great warships drifted silently, their torn hulls whispering the echoes of destruction. Among them, one ship stood out, massive, ancient, and eerily intact. Unlike the others, it wasn't a lifeless wreck. It was waiting. Watching. No one knew who had built it. No records, no blueprints, no history. It was beyond the understanding of every known species in the galaxy. Some believed it was a remnant of an extinct race, others whispered that it had built itself. What was certain was that no one could control it. Every attempt to crack its systems had ended in failure. It refused all commands, all overrides. Scientists, engineers, and even the most advanced AI minds had tried. They had all failed. And yet, one desperate faction, on the verge of war, saw an opportunity. If they could bring this warship back to life, they would hold the greatest power in the galaxy. But how do you fix something that refuses to be understood? That's when they found him. Ethan Cole wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a military strategist. He was a mechanic. A simple, down-on-his-luck engineer who had spent his life fixing old ships and scraping by in the outer colonies. He had no prestige, no degrees from elite academies. What he did have was an instinct for machines, an ability to understand them beyond schematics and programming. He was dragged into this mission without a choice. The moment he saw the ship, he knew it was unlike anything he had ever worked on. Its surface pulsed faintly, like the slow, steady heartbeat of something alive. It wasn't just a machine, it felt like it had a mind of its own. The crew that had brought him there watched from a distance, nervous, armed, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. No one wanted to get too close. This warship had a history of reacting violently. Ethan placed his hand on the hull. The metal was warm. That shouldn't have been possible. He exhaled slowly and muttered, "All right, let's see what's under the hood." The ship responded. A low hum filled the air, deep and resonant. Lights flickered to life along the corridors. The ground beneath his feet vibrated as if the ship had just taken a breath. The others panicked. Some reached for their weapons, but Ethan raised a hand. "No sudden moves," he warned. The warship wasn't threatening them. It was listening. Ethan knelt, running his fingers over a damaged panel. It wasn't rusted or broken in the way old ships usually were. It was something else entirely. As if the ship had been waiting for someone to understand its wounds. And then, a sound echoed through the warship. A voice. Faint. Garbled. Not human. Ethan's breath caught. He turned back to the crew, but their faces were pale, confused. They hadn't heard it. The warship wasn't speaking to them. It was speaking to him. And it was asking for help. He hesitated only for a second before responding, not knowing if the ship could even understand him. "I'm here." The hum deepened, resonating through the air, and a hidden doorway slid open before him, revealing the dark, uncharted corridors of the ship's heart. No one had ever been inside before. Ethan stepped forward. And the door closed behind him. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as the door sealed shut behind him, leaving him alone in the dim corridor. The air was thick with something unexplainable, not dust or decay, but a presence. The ship wasn't just metal and circuits. It was something else. Something aware. The soft hum that had responded to him earlier was now a steady vibration beneath his feet, like a quiet heartbeat. The corridor stretched forward in eerie silence, the walls smooth and seamless, pulsing faintly as if they were alive. No visible controls. No markings. Just an unsettling, endless passageway leading him deeper into the unknown. Ethan hesitated, glancing back, but the door had vanished. No seams. No handle. Just an unbroken wall of dark alloy. He swallowed hard. "Okay," he muttered under his breath, "guess I'm going forward." He took a cautious step. Then another. The ship didn't resist. Instead, it seemed to guide him, the faint glow along the walls shifting as he moved, subtly illuminating his path. Ethan had spent his life fixing machines, old freighters, cargo haulers, outdated warships from battles long past. He knew engines like the back of his hand, could patch up a failing system with little more than scrap metal and luck. But this was different. This ship wasn't just damaged. It felt wounded. The warship's voice, if he could even call it that, had reached out to him. Not in words, but in something deeper. A feeling. A call for help. But why him? He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a hacker. He was just a mechanic. Yet, something told him that no one else had been able to hear the ship because they had been trying to control it. Force it to respond. But Ethan? He had simply listened. The corridor finally opened into a vast chamber, unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls stretched impossibly high, curving in strange, elegant patterns that felt more organic than engineered. In the center, something loomed, a massive structure, suspended in midair, pulsing with dim blue light. It looked like an engine, but it wasn't like any engine Ethan had ever seen. It wasn't just a machine, it was integrated. Fused with the ship in a way that made it impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And it was damaged. Jagged cracks ran along its surface, flickering weakly, struggling to hold power. Sparks of energy flared unpredictably, like a failing heartbeat. Ethan stepped closer, his fingers instinctively reaching out before stopping himself. "What happened to you?" he murmured. The ship's hum deepened, vibrating through the air. The lights around him dimmed, and for the first time, Ethan felt it, memories. Not his own, but impressions, echoes of something ancient. He saw flashes of war. Explosions tearing through space. Ships, thousands of them, swarming, fighting, destroying. And this warship, alone, standing against them all. Then darkness. Silence. Abandonment. The images faded, leaving Ethan breathless. His head ached as if he had just lived through centuries of battles in mere seconds. He staggered back, gripping his forehead. The warship had been left behind. Forgotten. And now, it was breaking apart, its very core failing after standing alone for so long. Ethan exhaled slowly. "You don't want to be a weapon anymore, do you?" The ship didn't answer in words. But the flickering blue light of the damaged core seemed to soften, just slightly, as if acknowledging his words. He knew what needed to be done. Carefully, he pulled a small multi-tool from his belt, his hands moving on instinct. He had no schematics, no guide, no instructions. But machines had a language of their own, and Ethan had spent his entire life learning how to listen. The damage ran deep. Circuits fused in ways they shouldn't. Energy systems tangled, pulsing erratically like a failing heartbeat. This wasn't just old damage, it was deliberate. Someone had tried to break the ship. Sabotage it. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't know who or why, but one thing was clear, this ship wasn't meant to be found. Someone had wanted it lost. And now, they would want it destroyed. A sudden noise echoed through the chamber, sharp, mechanical, distant. Ethan froze. He wasn't alone. Somewhere beyond this room, something was moving. Not the ship. Something else. Ethan's breath quickened as he slowly turned toward the source of the sound. The shadows in the corridor shifted, a faint metallic scraping reaching his ears. He gripped his tool tighter, his mind racing. Was it a security system? A defense mechanism? Or something worse? The ship's hum grew louder, almost protective, as if warning him. Ethan stepped back toward the core, his instincts screaming at him to stay quiet, to stay hidden. And then, the shadows moved. A figure emerged. Not human. Not entirely machine. And it was watching him. Ethan's breath caught as the figure stepped forward, emerging from the dim light. It was humanoid in shape, but wrong in every other way. Its body was covered in segmented plating, smooth and black, reflecting the ship's faint glow. Thin lines of blue light pulsed beneath its surface, similar to the damaged core Ethan had just examined. It moved with unsettling precision, each step calculated, controlled. Not clumsy like a machine, but not fluid like a living being either. It stopped just a few feet away. Ethan didn't move. His instincts told him that this thing, whatever it was, wasn't something he could fight. He wasn't a soldier. He was a mechanic with a multi-tool in his hand and no backup. For a long moment, the figure simply stood there, silent, watching him. Then, it spoke. "You are not authorized." The voice was flat, neither male nor female, carrying an unnatural distortion. The words echoed, as if they came from deep within the figure rather than its mouth, if it even had one. Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah, I get that a lot." No reaction. No movement. Just that cold, unreadable stare. The ship's hum deepened again, vibrating through the floor, almost like a warning. Ethan shifted slightly, keeping his voice calm. "Look, I don't know what you are, but this ship? It's dying. Its core is breaking down. I was trying to fix it." Silence. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the figure tilted its head, almost as if considering his words. "That knowledge is not permitted." Ethan frowned. "What does that even mean?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand, and for the first time, Ethan noticed the intricate design of its fingers, too long, too delicate, each one ending in razor-thin points. Light flickered between the joints, pulses of energy running through the strange material of its body. A surge of cold panic hit him as the air around him shifted, crackling with unseen energy. Ethan took a step back. "Whoa, wait. I don't mean any harm. I just..." Before he could finish, the ship reacted. A low, guttural sound, deeper than before, vibrating through the entire structure. The walls around him darkened, pulsing in warning. The figure hesitated. The blue light running along its body flickered, disrupted, like interference in a signal. Ethan felt it then, something unspoken between him and the ship. A connection. The warship didn't want him hurt. The figure straightened. Its head lifted slightly, as if listening to something only it could hear. Then, in an eerily smooth motion, it turned and began to walk away, retreating into the shadows of the corridor. Ethan exhaled, his heart still racing. He knew this wasn't over. Whatever that thing was, it hadn't left because of him. It had left because the ship had forced it to. And that meant something else, something bigger, was at play here. He turned back toward the core. The flickering light had stabilized just slightly, but the cracks remained. It wouldn't last long. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. He was in way over his head. He had been brought here to fix a ship. Instead, he had stepped into a mystery older than anything he had ever known. A warship beyond its creators, beyond anyone's understanding. And now, something, or someone, wanted to keep it broken. His hands clenched into fists. Well, too bad. Because Ethan wasn't leaving until he found out the truth. Ethan's hands hovered over the core, his fingers tracing the fractured lines of energy coursing through it. The warship wasn't just damaged, it had been deliberately weakened. Someone had ensured that it would never power up again. But why? And more importantly, why was it reaching out to him? The pulsing hum beneath his feet grew stronger, a quiet urgency vibrating through the walls. The ship wanted him to do something. But what? He had no blueprints, no tools beyond the basics in his belt. He was a mechanic, not a miracle worker. A sudden jolt shot through the air, sharp and electric. The chamber trembled, lights flickering wildly. Ethan staggered back just as a sharp, mechanical screech echoed from the corridor where the figure had disappeared. Then came the sound of metal tearing. Ethan's stomach twisted. That thing, whatever it was, wasn't alone. The ship's hum intensified, not just vibrating now, but shaking. It was afraid. Ethan turned back to the core. "Okay," he muttered, "I get it. We don't have much time." He worked fast, hands moving on instinct. The wiring was unlike anything he had ever seen, pulsing like veins, shifting as if alive. The deeper he dug, the more he realized this ship wasn't just built. It had grown. A distant clang rang out, closer this time. Then another. They were coming. Ethan's breath quickened. He had no idea what would happen if the warship fully powered up again, but one thing was clear: the alternative was worse. His fingers found a deep crack near the base of the core, a weak point where energy flickered unevenly. That was the key. If he could bypass the damage, reroute the flow. Another screech tore through the air, this time accompanied by rapid, metallic clicks. The sound of movement. Fast. Ethan gritted his teeth and worked faster. The ship trembled violently, as if struggling to hold itself together. He could feel it now, its desperation. It wasn't just a machine. It was something more. Something that had been fighting for a long, long time. The clicking grew louder, closer. Shadows stretched along the walls. Then, just as Ethan made the final connection, the warship roared to life. A shock wave of energy burst outward, slamming into the walls and sending a deep, vibrating pulse through every inch of the ship. The lights flared blindingly bright, the floor shaking beneath him. And then, everything went silent. Ethan barely had time to breathe before a new sound filled the air. Not mechanical. Not human. A voice. Low. Deep. Ancient. And it spoke one word. Awakened. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The word echoed through the chamber, vibrating deep in his chest, not just a sound but a presence. The ship, no, whatever intelligence remained within it, was awake. The glow from the core intensified, shifting from a flickering blue to a steady, pulsing white. Energy crackled through the walls, flowing like a current reawakening after centuries of dormancy. The ship was no longer dying. It was alive. But before Ethan could even process what that meant, the atmosphere shifted. A piercing, metallic screech rang through the corridors again, only this time, it was different. Not a warning. Not a signal. It was panic. The enemy had realized what he had done. Ethan turned, his pulse pounding. The shadows in the hallway twisted unnaturally as multiple figures emerged, no longer just one, but three. Their movements were sharper now, more urgent, their sleek, inhuman forms reflecting the blinding light of the reawakened core. Their blue-lit bodies flickered erratically, like disrupted signals. Ethan braced himself, but before he could even think of a plan, the ship reacted. The walls around him trembled, shifting. Panels that had been smooth and lifeless before now moved, sliding apart to reveal unseen mechanisms. A deep hum rumbled through the chamber, the kind that made his bones vibrate. The warship was no longer just responding. It was preparing. One of the figures lunged, impossibly fast. Ethan barely had time to duck before a razor-thin arm slashed through the air where he had just stood. The ship's pulse quickened in response, and suddenly, the floor beneath the attacker shifted. A burst of light erupted from hidden panels, slamming into the nearest figure. It shrieked, a horrible, distorted sound, before its body convulsed and shattered into fragments of liquid metal, dissolving into the floor like it had never existed. Ethan's eyes widened. The ship wasn't just defending itself. It was fighting back. The remaining figures hesitated, their bodies flickering erratically, as if struggling to process what was happening. Then, without warning, they turned and fled, disappearing into the depths of the ship's endless corridors. Ethan exhaled shakily, barely believing what he had just seen. He turned back to the core, its light pulsing steadily now, stronger than before. "You remember," he murmured. "Don't you?" The ship didn't answer in words, but the hum deepened, resonating through the walls. It wasn't just a warship. It wasn't just a machine. It had been something else before. And now, it was something more. But before Ethan could ask another question, the ship suddenly dimmed. The steady white glow flickered, just slightly, like a warning. Then, far off in the distance, the entire structure shook with a deep, resonant impact. Something else was coming. Not the figures from before. Something bigger. Something that had just realized the warship wasn't lost anymore. And now, it was coming to finish what it had started. Ethan barely had time to brace himself before the entire warship lurched violently. A deep, resonant impact shook the structure, sending waves of tremors through the walls. The lights flickered, and the ship's hum shifted, no longer steady, but urgent, almost alarmed. Whatever was coming was close. Too close. The floor beneath him vibrated as he steadied himself against the control panel. The warship wasn't just reacting, it was trying to tell him something. Ethan closed his eyes for a split second, focusing on the pulse beneath his fingertips. And then, he understood. It wasn't just any enemy approaching. It was them. The ones who had silenced the warship before, who had stripped away its power, its memory. They were coming to finish what they had started. A deep metallic groan echoed through the corridors, followed by the unmistakable sound of something breaking through. Ethan turned toward the entrance just as the walls split open. The air crackled. Then, out of the darkness, they emerged. These weren't like the smaller figures from before. These were massive. Towering, armored beings, their bodies shifting like liquid metal, their eyes burning with unnatural light. They stepped forward in perfect synchronization, moving as one, their presence swallowing every inch of space around them. The ship's hum turned into a deep, rolling vibration, defiant, but wary. It had fought them before. It had lost. Ethan swallowed hard. His instincts screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. If he left now, the warship would fall again, its memory wiped, its purpose erased. And this time, there would be no coming back. The largest figure stepped forward, towering over him. Unlike the others, this one didn't raise a weapon. It simply stared, its gaze unreadable. Then, in a voice that sent chills down Ethan's spine, it spoke. "You should not be here." Ethan clenched his fists. He had heard those words before. But this time, he wasn't backing down. "You did this, didn't you?" he said, his voice steady. "You destroyed the ship, took away its power. You were afraid of what it could become." The figure didn't react. But the silence spoke volumes. Ethan felt the warship's pulse again, weak but determined. It wasn't just awake. It was waiting. He turned back to the core, his mind racing. The ship had power now. It had a chance. But it needed him to act. The towering figure took another step forward. "Leave now. This is not your fight." Ethan exhaled sharply. "It is now." Before they could react, he reached forward and placed his hand against the core. The ship responded instantly. A surge of energy shot through him, flooding the warship's systems, igniting circuits that had been dead for centuries. The walls trembled, shifting, as the ship roared to life. The intruders reacted too late. The ship moved. Panels slid open, releasing bursts of blinding light. The towering figures staggered as the warship's defenses engaged, waves of energy surging through its structure. The largest figure turned sharply, as if realizing, for the first time, it had made a mistake. The warship wasn't lost anymore. It was fighting back. Ethan felt the shift beneath his feet as the ship prepared for something bigger. The energy built, pulsing through the floor, rising toward the core. It wasn't just defending itself. It was getting ready to leave. The intruders lunged, desperate now, but the ship was faster. A final surge of power erupted from the core, and in an instant, everything around Ethan vanished. For a split second, there was only silence. Then, light. Stars. Movement. Ethan stumbled as the ship jumped, tearing free from whatever had held it in place for so long. The dark figures, the endless corridors, gone. He exhaled, his heart pounding. The warship had escaped. It was free. But as the hum beneath him settled, steady and strong, he felt something else. A presence. Not the ship. Not the enemy. Something, watching. And then, just as he thought he had one, a voice, not mechanical, not human, whispered through the ship's systems. You were never meant to find this. Ethan's blood ran cold. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. Ethan stood frozen, his breath shallow as the voice echoed through the ship's systems. It wasn't coming from the core, nor from any part of the warship's intelligence that he had awakened. It was something else, something that had been there all along, waiting, watching. The stars outside streaked past in long, glowing trails as the ship moved through space, free from the forces that had once held it captive. But despite its newfound strength, the hum beneath Ethan's feet no longer felt triumphant. It was cautious. Aware. Ethan swallowed hard. Who are you? For a long moment, there was nothing. Just the steady pulse of the ship's energy, the faint flicker of controls adjusting themselves. Then, the voice returned, calmer this time, but no less unsettling. You woke something that was never meant to be woken. Ethan frowned. He had expected threats, maybe even a warning. But there was something else beneath the words. A trace of regret. He turned toward the core, watching as it pulsed steadily, its glow no longer flickering with uncertainty. The warship was strong now. Alive. But that didn't explain the voice. I fixed the ship, Ethan said slowly, trying to piece together the fragments of the mystery. I gave it power again. Who are you? Why were you watching? A quiet hum filled the air, and for a brief second, Ethan felt something, like a memory brushing against his mind, something not his own. Then the voice returned. You call it a warship. That is what it became. But it was not always that. Ethan's pulse quickened. He glanced around the chamber, at the walls that seemed more alive now than ever before. Then what was it? A pause. Then, a promise. Ethan's brow furrowed. I don't understand. The voice seemed to sigh, as if carrying the weight of something ancient. This ship was never built to destroy. It was meant to protect. To guide. But war changed that. The ones who created it tried to reshape its purpose, to turn it into a weapon against forces they feared. But they feared too late. Ethan felt the weight of those words settle deep in his chest. And the ones who attacked. The ones who tried to keep it buried. The remnants of those who lost control. The realization struck him like a shockwave. The beings that had tried to stop him, they weren't just invaders or enemies. They were the architects of this warship's imprisonment. They had built it, twisted its purpose, then feared what it had become. And now, he had undone all of that. Ethan exhaled, dragging a hand down his face. So what now? The ship's hum deepened, thoughtful. Now, it is free. Ethan let those words settle in. The warship had been shackled for who knows how long, locked away, controlled, until it had almost faded into nothing. But now, it was awake, aware. No longer a weapon. No longer lost. And yet, something still didn't sit right. He looked out at the endless expanse of stars. The enemy had been left behind, at least for now, but something told him this wasn't over. You said I was never meant to find this, Ethan said quietly. But I did. The voice didn't respond immediately. When it did, it was softer. Perhaps that was the mistake they made. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. A mistake or fate, either way, he was here now. And so was the ship. A quiet beep sounded from the control panel beside him. He turned to see a blinking display, a star map, shifting, adjusting. A new course was being set. Not by him. Not by any outside force. By the warship itself. Ethan hesitated. Where are we going? The hum beneath his feet softened, steady, calm. Home. The word sent a shiver down his spine. Not because it was alarming, but because it was the first time the ship had spoken with certainty. Ethan leaned back against the console, exhaling slowly. He had come here expecting a wreck, a lifeless remnant of something ancient. Instead, he had found something much more. Something with a past, a will of its own. And now, it had a future. He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. Guess I'm in this for the long haul, huh? The ship didn't answer. It didn't have to. Because deep in his gut, Ethan already knew this was just the beginning.